Ethan had never imagined that the galaxy would be this vast, this dangerous, and this indifferent to the struggles of a single human. He stood outside the towering palace gates of Princess Valera's kingdom, his heart pounding in his chest. The message he carried was urgent. His home planet was under attack. An entire fleet of enemy ships was descending upon Earth, and the forces of his world were too weak to defend it. He had made his way across the galaxy, traveling through strange systems, enduring countless dangers, all for one reason: to seek the help of Princess Valera. Her empire was the most powerful in the galaxy. If anyone could help, it was her. But now, standing at the gates, doubt started creeping in. Would she even listen to him? The palace was everything he had imagined, massive and intimidating. The walls were lined with ancient statues, and the grand entrance was guarded by alien soldiers with fierce, glowing eyes. As he was led through the halls, he couldn't help but feel small. The grandness of it all made him feel like nothing more than an ant in the presence of a giant. After what felt like an eternity, Ethan was finally brought into the throne room. Princess Valera sat upon her throne, surrounded by her advisors and guards. She was beautiful beyond words, her long flowing hair shimmering under the palace's golden lights. Her eyes, cold and calculating, studied him as he entered, and for a moment he wondered if she even saw him as a human being. To her, he was likely nothing more than a problem to solve, or worse, an annoyance. "State your business, human," she commanded, her voice sharp and clear. With an air of arrogance that made Ethan's blood boil, Ethan took a deep breath, reminding himself that he had come here for a reason. He couldn't afford to lose his temper. Now, he stepped forward, his voice steady, despite the nerves rattling in his chest. "My planet Earth needs your help.
Ow.
We are under attack by a fleet of hostile invaders. If we don't get help soon, our entire world will fall," he said, his voice desperate. Valera raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. Her eyes glinted with the arrogance he had heard so much about. She was untouchable, a ruler whose empire spanned vast distances. In her mind, nothing and no one could pose a threat to her. "And why should I care about your planet, human?" she asked, her tone condescending. "You are far from the center of the galaxy. Your struggles mean nothing to my empire." Ethan felt a pang of frustration, but he forced himself to remain calm. He had known she would be difficult, but hearing her say it so plainly still hurt. "I'm not asking for much," he said, trying to keep his voice level. "It's just enough support to fight back, to keep the invaders at bay long enough for us to prepare. I know your empire has the power to help. Please, princess, we need you." For a moment, Valera simply stared at him, her gaze cold and calculating. The room was silent, the air thick with tension. Ethan's heart raced as he waited for her response. "You think I would risk my empire to save a backwater planet like Earth?" Valera finally said, her voice full of disdain. "Your planet is weak. It is not worth the resources it would take to help you." Ethan's stomach sank. This wasn't the response he had hoped for, but it wasn't a surprise either. He had heard of Valera's pride and her reputation for never helping those she deemed beneath her. She had always been one to look down on lesser species, especially humans. "You don't understand," Ethan said, his voice rising with urgency. "If Earth falls, it could destabilize the entire region. If the invaders succeed here, they'll come for your empire next. You'll be next."
8.
At this, Valera's expression softened for a moment, though the hint of amusement never left her face. She leaned back in her throne, as though Ethan's words were nothing more than a minor distraction. She waved a hand dismissively. "Your planet is insignificant, and so is your warning. I have no need to waste my time on something so trivial. You are dismissed." Ethan's mouth went dry. This was it. This was the moment when his last hope had been shattered. He had traveled all this way, endured countless hardships, and this was the response he received? His mind raced, but the words wouldn't come. He was too stunned to protest. "No," he said, his voice quieter now but firm. "You're wrong. You may think Earth is insignificant, but we are not. If you don't help us now, it will be your empire that suffers." Valera's eyes flashed with irritation. "Enough of this nonsense," she said, rising from her throne. I have no more time for you. Leave now. Ethan stood there, frozen, his heart sinking. He had failed. Had hoped no, begged for her help, but it was clear now that nothing would change her mind. The princess was too wrapped up in her own arrogance to see the bigger picture. As Valera's guards moved forward to escort him out, Ethan's mind raced. He couldn't give up. Not yet. There had to be a way. As he was escorted out of the throne room, he glanced back at the princess, who was already turning her attention to something else. To her, he was just another insignificant human. But to him, the fight for his home planet had just begun. He would find another way, no matter the cost. Ethan walked out of the palace, the heavy doors closing behind him with a thundering sound. His heart felt as heavy as the weight of the galaxy itself. He had come to Princess Valera with hope, with the belief that she would help save Earth. But now, that hope was shattered. The princess had refused him without a second thought, dismissing his plea as though it was nothing more than an inconvenience. As he stepped outside, the warm air of the planet's landscape did little to ease his frustration. The vast city stretched out before him, filled with high-tech buildings and advanced technology that Earth could only dream of. Yet, despite all of this, the princess remained blind to the bigger picture. Valera, in her arrogance, had ignored the dangers facing not only Earth but the entire galaxy. Ethan stood still for a moment, staring up at the sky. His mind raced, trying to think of any way to change Valera's mind. He had heard the rumors about her, how she ruled with an iron fist, how she refused to listen to anyone, especially those she deemed beneath her. But he had never imagined that the cost of such pride would be the destruction of entire worlds. He couldn't just let it end here. The Earth was too important. The people he loved were depending on him, and he couldn't return empty-handed. Ethan took a deep breath, forcing himself to calm down. There had to be a way to make her see reason, to show her that this wasn't just about one planet, it was about the future of the galaxy itself. Without thinking, he began walking through the city, heading toward the outskirts where the more remote areas were. His thoughts were a blur, but one thing was clear: he couldn't give up, not now. He had made it this far, and he wasn't about to stop because of one rejection. He needed to find a solution, even if it meant taking matters into his own hands. Hours passed as he wandered through the streets, lost in thought. The sun began to set, casting long shadows across the towering buildings. Despite the advanced technology of the city, there was a certain quietness to it, Ola. Silence that made him feel even more alone in this strange world. It was then that he noticed something strange, in the distance, near the edge of the city. There was a small group of people gathered around a building. They seemed to be talking in low voices, and as he approached, he could hear snippets of their conversation. It wasn't long before he realized that they were discussing the very same invasion he had come here to stop. One of the individuals, a woman with short silver hair and bright green eyes, was speaking passionately about the need for action. Words were filled with urgency, much like Ethan's had been when he first arrived at the palace. He stepped closer, his curiosity piqued. "Why does Valera refuse to listen?" the woman was asking. "She knows what's coming, and still, she does nothing. The galaxy is on the brink of war, and yet she remains in her palace, content with her power." Ethan, hearing this, felt a spark of hope. This woman understood. She was aware of the danger. He stepped forward, approaching her with caution, unsure of how to make himself known. "You're right," Ethan said, his voice low but firm. "Princess Valera refuses to help. I tried to warn her, but she doesn't care. She's too proud, too wrapped up in her own empire to see the truth." The woman turned toward him, her sharp eyes scanning him before a knowing look crossed her face. She didn't seem surprised by his words. In fact, she almost seemed relieved to find someone who shared her frustrations. "You came to her for help, didn't you?" she asked, her voice soft, but filled with understanding. "I've seen many come to her, all asking for the same thing. And each time, she turns them away." Ethan nodded, his hands clenched into fists. "I don't understand why," I told her. "That Earth was at risk, that the invaders would only grow stronger. but she refused to listen. The woman sighed, her expression filled with a mixture of sadness and anger. Valera is many things, but she is not blind. She knows exactly what's at stake. The problem is, she believes that she's invincible, that her empire is untouchable. She sees no reason to help anyone, especially not someone as insignificant as a human. Ethan's chest tightened. He had heard the rumors, but to hear them spoken aloud made them all the more real. "Then what do we do?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The woman's eyes narrowed as if she were weighing his words. "We don't wait for Valera to change her mind. We make her see that her empire is not invincible. We show her that the galaxy will fall if Earth does. Only then will she be forced to act." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. "But how do we do that? How do we make her see the truth?" The woman smiled, though it was a wry, almost bitter expression. "We use the one thing she cannot ignore, her own pride. We show her that her empire is not the most powerful in the galaxy, that there are forces out there that even she cannot control." Ethan took a step closer, his mind racing. "And how do we do that?" The woman reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, glowing device. It looked ancient, unlike anything Ethan had seen before. "This," she said, holding it up, "is a piece of technology that Valera would never expect. It can disrupt the very core of her empire's defenses. If we use it at the right time, it will make her realize that her empire is vulnerable. Only then will she be forced to listen." Ethan stared at the device, his mind spinning. This was it. This was the chance he needed. He could make Valera see the truth, even if it meant going behind her back. "But where do we begin?" he asked, his voice full of determination. The woman's smile grew. "We start by getting you back to Earth. We'll use the device to show Valera that her pride is her greatest weakness. And when she sees that, she'll have no choice but to help." Ethan nodded, feeling a renewed sense of hope. He wasn't alone in this fight anymore. Together they would make Valera see the truth. The night was quiet, but Ethan's mind was far from calm. The woman who had introduced herself as Lyra explained that their next move was to return to Earth and use the device to shake Princess Valera's confidence. It seemed like a dangerous and risky plan, but at that moment, it was their only chance. The device, she claimed, could disable the defenses that Valera's empire had relied on for centuries, showing her that no empire, no matter how powerful, was invincible. But even with a plan in place, doubt lingered in Ethan's mind. Valera had rejected him so easily, and the idea of going behind her back made him uneasy. He had come all this way, asking for help, only to be turned away with such coldness. Could he really betray her like this? Was he prepared to take such drastic measures? As he walked the streets of the alien city, lost in his thoughts, he found himself near the edge of the palace grounds. He had not planned to be there, but the walk had brought him to this spot without him even realizing it. The towering walls of the palace loomed above him, and for a moment, he felt small and insignificant again, like nothing more than an ant in a vast, uncaring world. But something caught his eye. A figure moved just beyond the wall's shadows, and Ethan froze. It was a woman, dressed in the traditional robes of the royal court, though her face was hidden beneath a hood. There was something almost familiar about the way she moved, but Ethan couldn't place it. Without thinking, he stepped forward, his curiosity getting the better of him. The woman turned slightly, as though sensing his presence, and their eyes met. For a moment, Ethan was stunned by the depth of emotion in her gaze. It was a mixture of sadness and regret, emotions he had not expected to see from someone in Valera's court. Was she another advisor? A servant? Or perhaps someone more important than she appeared? Before he could speak, the woman held up a hand to silence him. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. Her voice was soft, almost fragile, that it carried an air of authority that Ethan couldn't ignore. I'm sorry," Ethan stammered, taken aback by her sudden appearance. "I didn't mean to intrude. I was just thinking." The woman studied him for a moment, her eyes narrowing slightly. "You came to Princess Valera for help, didn't you?" she asked, her voice calm but with a hint of knowing. Ethan nodded, unsure of what to say next. There was something about this woman that made him feel as though she understood more than she was letting on. He had heard whispers of the princess's court, and there were rumors of a few key figures who held more influence than even Valera's advisors. Was this woman one of them? I came here to save my people, Ethan said, his voice filled with determination. Earth is under attack. I thought Valera could help, but she refused. The woman's face softened, a hint of sympathy crossing her features. She refuses many who come to her. She believes her empire is beyond any danger. She's been like this for a long time. Why? Ethan asked, his frustration growing. Why doesn't she see what's at stake? Why doesn't she care? The woman sighed deeply, her eyes looking down at the ground as if trying to find the right words. Princess Valera has always been proud, but it's more than that. Her pride is the only thing she has left. She lost something long ago, a family, a sense of purpose. She rules because she has nothing else. She admits she's wrong. If she asks for help, it would mean admitting that she's not as strong as she thinks she is, and she can't do that. Ethan felt a pang of sympathy for Valera. Despite her arrogance, there was clearly more to her than he had first believed. She wasn't just a cold, untouchable ruler. She was someone who had lost something, someone who was afraid to show weakness. But that doesn't explain why she refuses to help, Ethan said, shaking his head. The galaxy is at risk. Earth is at risk. What's it going to take for her to see that? The woman's gaze turned serious. She may never see it on her own, but you can make her. Right about one thing: if Earth falls, the rest of the galaxy will follow. She just needs to understand that. You have to make her believe it, and you can't do that by asking. Ethan frowned. So, what do you suggest I do? The woman stepped closer to him, her voice low, but filled with urgency. Not the only one who has lost something. There are others who are just as desperate as you. People who would do anything to get their home back. If you want to show Valera that her empire isn't as invincible as she thinks, you'll have to find those who have already begun fighting against her. Together, you can bring down the walls she's built around herself. Ethan thought about her words. Could it be true? Were there others like him, willing to fight for the greater good, even if it meant defying the princess? And if so, how could he find them? Before he could respond, the woman stepped back, her expression hardening. I can't help you any further. But know this, if you want to save Earth, you'll have to challenge Valera in ways she'll never expected. She may be a princess, but she is not above being wrong. With that, the woman turned and vanished into the shadows, leaving Ethan standing alone once again. He was filled with a mix of emotions, frustration, confusion, and, for the first time, hope. Valera wasn't invincible. And maybe, just maybe, he could find a way to make her see that. Ethan stood in the shadow of the towering palace walls, still feeling the weight of the conversation with the mysterious woman. The night air was cooler now, the stars above seeming so distant, so far away from the chaos that was rapidly consuming his thoughts. Earth was under threat, and Princess Valera had refused to listen to him. But something in his heart told him that the battle wasn't over yet. He had to find a way to make her understand the danger, to make her see beyond her pride. The next few days felt like an endless blur. Ethan, now determined to take action, spent his time looking for anyone who might help him in his mission. He knew that he couldn't do this alone. If he was going to make Valera realize the seriousness of the threat, he needed allies, people who understood the stakes as much as he did. He wandered through the city, asking questions, searching for signs of resistance, or anyone who might be willing to challenge Valera's rule. Despite his growing sense of urgency, he could not shake the feeling of isolation. The city was so advanced, so full of life, but Ethan felt like an outsider, a lone human in a sea of powerful beings who didn't care for his planet's struggle. It wasn't until he reached the outskirts of the city that he found what he was looking for. The buildings stood in the shadow of the palace, a humble place compared to the grand structures of the royal court. The lights inside flickered dimly, and there was a quiet hum of energy in the air. As he approached, he saw a group of people gathered around a large table, their faces serious, their voices hushed. They didn't seem to notice him at first, too absorbed in their discussion. Ethan stepped closer, the sound of his footsteps alerting them to his presence. The group turned, and one of the figures, a tall, dark-haired man with piercing blue eyes, narrowed his gaze, sizing Ethan up. "Who are you?" the man asked, his voice firm but not unkind. "I'm Ethan," he replied, trying to steady his breath. "I've come to ask for your help." The man didn't answer immediately, but his eyes flicked to the others in the room as if seeking confirmation. Finally, he spoke again, his tone softer now. "Help with what?" he asked. Ethan's heart raced. He could feel the weight of his mission pressing down on him. This was it. He had to convince them. He had to show them that the fight was worth it. "Earth is under attack," Ethan began. "A fleet of invaders is closing in. We don't have the strength to fight them off alone. I went to Princess Valera for help, but she refused. I need people who are willing to fight for what's right. I can't do this alone." The man regarded him for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then, to Ethan's surprise, he nodded. "You're not the first to ask for help," the man said, his voice calm. "But most of us have learned to stop asking Valera for anything. She's too proud, too blinded by her own empire." Ethan felt a flicker of hope. "So you're willing to help?" The man hesitated for a moment before answering. "We're not interested in starting a war, but we're not going to stand by while the galaxy burns either." He extended a hand toward Ethan. "I'm Urek, and if you want to stop this invasion, we'll help. But you'll have to prove to us that you're willing to do whatever it takes." Ethan didn't hesitate. You shook Yarek's hand firmly, grateful for the opportunity. "I'll do whatever it takes. I can't let Earth fall." Yarek's expression softened slightly. "We've been fighting this battle for a long time, in our own way, but we can't do it alone either. We need the right kind of help, those who understand the stakes and aren't afraid to take risks." Ethan nodded. "Then we're on the same side. What do we do next?" Yarek turned to the others in the room. "We've got a plan, but we need to make it count. Valera won't help us, but she might listen if we show her that her empire is vulnerable. We've got to hit them where it hurts." The room fell into a heavy silence as the others nodded in agreement. Ethan could sense the tension in the air, the weight of the decision they were about to make. This wasn't just about saving Earth anymore. This was about challenging an empire that had ruled for centuries, an empire that had grown too arrogant to see the dangers around it. Yarek turned back to Ethan. "There's a way to disrupt Valera's defenses. It's not easy, and it won't be without consequences. But if we can disable her ships, she'll have no choice but to act. If she sees that even her most powerful weapons are useless, she'll be forced to realize the truth." Ethan's heart beat faster as he listened. This was the chance he had been waiting for. He had no idea how they would pull it off, but with Yarek and his group, he finally had a glimmer of hope. For the first time, felt like the impossible might actually be possible. "We've already got people in place," Yarek continued. "There are a few other factions who oppose Valera's rule. Together, we can make her understand. But it's going to take every last bit of effort. We'll need to act fast." Ethan looked at the group around him, their faces serious, determined. They weren't just looking for a fight, they were looking for a way to save the galaxy. And, in that moment, Ethan realized that he wasn't just fighting for Earth anymore. He was fighting for all the worlds that had been abandoned by those who thought they were too powerful to fail. He wasn't alone anymore. Jarek leaned in closer, his voice low. "We've all lost something to Valera's pride. But if we can work together, if we can bring her down, we can rebuild what she's broken. This isn't just about stopping the invasion. It's about ending her reign of arrogance." Ethan's resolve hardened. He had come to Valera's palace hoping for help. Now he was going to bring her down. It wasn't going to be easy. With Yarek and the others by his side, he knew that they had a chance. "We're in this together," Ethan said, his voice full of determination. Yarek gave him a small smile. "We sure are. Now let's make sure Valera knows she's not the only one with power." Ethan stood with Yarek and the group, gazing out over the horizon. The night was still, but the tension in the air was thick. The time to act was now. The invaders were already making their way toward Earth, and they couldn't afford to waste another minute. The plan they had put together was risky, but it was their only chance. The alliance of rebels they had gathered, people from different parts of the galaxy, all shared one goal: to make Princess Valeera see that her empire wasn't invincible. Garrick paced back and forth, checking the communication devices strapped to his belt. The others were preparing for the operation, each one focused on their part. It was strange for Ethan to see these people, so unlike the royal courtiers he had encountered in the palace. There was no arrogance here, no sense of superiority. There was only determination, a shared desire to fight for something greater than themselves. "This is it," Garrick said, stopping in front of Ethan. "The invasion fleet is moving into position. We've got one shot at this. If we can disable Valeera's defense grid, she'll have no choice but to act. Her pride will force her to defend her empire." Ethan nodded, though his mind raced. He had never imagined he would be here on the edge of a battle, fighting against a powerful empire. The weight of it all was overwhelming, but his resolve was stronger than ever. He couldn't turn back now. Earth needed him, and this was their only chance. "We're ready," Ethan said, his voice steady, though he could feel the adrenaline coursing through him. "Let's do this." With that, the group set off, moving quickly through the shadows of the city, each person knowing their role. They didn't speak much. There was no need for words now. Action would speak louder than anything they could say. As they reached the edge of the city, they approached a hidden underground facility where they had gathered the equipment they needed for the operation. The facility was small and unassuming. Hidden beneath the surface of the city, inside rows of advanced technology lined the walls, tools and weapons that would help them carry out the plan. Ethan had never seen anything like it before. This wasn't just about brute force, it was about strategy, precision, and using the tools of the galaxy's most advanced empire against itself. Garrick led the group to a large console in the center of the room, where the most important piece of their plan was waiting: the device they would use to disrupt Valeera's defense grid. It was a small, unremarkable thing, but its potential was enormous. In the wrong hands, it could be a weapon of unimaginable destruction. But in the hands of those fighting for survival, it was the key to victory. "We've got to get this into position," Garrick said, his voice low but urgent. "Once we activate it, Valeera's defenses will go offline for a brief window. That's when we make our move." Ethan felt a pang of uncertainty, but he pushed it aside. There was no time for doubt. They were about to face the invasion head-on, and Valeera's empire would soon learn that no one was invincible, not even her. The plan was simple. They would use the device to take down the defense grid, leaving Valeera's fleet vulnerable. Then they would strike, showing her that Earth and the galaxy were not as easily controlled as she believed. It was a dangerous move, but if they succeeded, Valeera would be forced to take action. "Are you ready?" Garrick asked, turning to Ethan. Ethan nodded, gripping his weapon tightly. "I'm ready." With that, the group moved out, heading toward the heart of Valeera's defense network. The streets of the city were eerily quiet, and the silence seemed to amplify their every movement. As they neared their destination, Ethan could feel the weight of what they were about to do. They were not just fighting for Earth anymore. They were fighting for every world that had been ignored, for every planet that had been deemed unworthy of attention by the powerful empires like Valeera's. They reached the control center, a massive structure guarded by armed soldiers and advanced security systems. But the group had come prepared. They moved swiftly, disabling the security measures one by one, their movements calculated and precise. There was no room for error. They couldn't afford to be caught. As they approached the central control room, Ethan's heart beat faster. The device was already in place, connected to the mainframe that controlled the defense grid. All that remained was to activate it. "Get ready," Garrick said, his voice barely a whisper. "We'll have just a few minutes before the system resets. We have to make every second count." Ethan's hand hovered over the activation switch, his fingers trembling slightly. The weight of the moment was heavy, but there was no turning back now. With a deep breath, he pressed the button. The room lit up with a soft hum as the device powered up. The defense grid systems flickered, then went dark. The silence was deafening. The city, once protected by an impenetrable shield, was now vulnerable. Ethan felt a surge of hope, but it was quickly replaced by the sharp reality of what they had just done. "This is it," Yarrick said, his voice filled with urgency. "We need to move now. We've only got a few minutes before they detect the breach." The group rushed to the main command center, where the control systems for the defense fleet were located. As they entered the room, Ethan could feel the weight of the task before them. They weren't just trying to stop an invasion. They were challenging the very foundation of Valera's empire. The group worked quickly, disabling the fleet's communication systems and targeting systems. It was chaos, but in the midst of it, Ethan could see the plan coming together. Valera's empire was no longer untouchable. The invaders, once on the verge of victory, now found themselves in a position where they could be stopped. "We've done it," one of the rebels said, his voice filled with disbelief. But before Ethan could respond, a loud alarm blared through the facility. The breach had been detected. "Move," Yarrick shouted. "We've got to get out of here." As the group raced toward the exit, Ethan glanced back at the facility. The plan had worked. For the first time, Valera's empire was vulnerable, and when she realized it, she would have no choice but to listen. But now, the real battle was about to begin. The alarms were deafening, echoing through the narrow halls of the control center. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest as he sprinted alongside Yarrick and the others. They had completed their mission. The defense grid was down, and Valera's fleet was now vulnerable, but their victory had come at a price. The breach had been detected, and now they had only moments before security forces arrived to stop them. "Move faster," Yarrick shouted, his voice filled with urgency as they rounded a corner, heading toward the exit. "We need to get to the backup shuttle before they lock the facility down." Ethan's legs burned with every step, but he didn't dare slow down. The success of their mission had given him a new sense of determination. They had taken down the Empire's most powerful defense system, and now it was time to take advantage of the opening they had created. The rebels, though fewer in number, were more determined than ever, and now they had the element of surprise on their side. As they reached the shuttle bay, Ethan could hear the sound of boots pounding behind them. The security forces weren't far behind, and if they didn't reach the shuttle in time, the whole plan would fail. The heavy doors to the bay stood before them, but there was no time to wait for them to open. Yarrick punched a series of codes into a nearby panel, and with a loud hiss, the door slid open. The shuttle, small but sleek, waited for them inside. Without a second thought, they rushed on board, and Yarrick quickly sealed the door behind them. "Take off now," Yarrick ordered the pilot, who didn't hesitate. The shuttle's engines roared to life, and the vessel shot into the sky, soaring away from the planet at breakneck speed. Behind them, the sounds of the alarms faded, but the weight of what they had just done hung heavy in the air. As the shuttle flew into space, Ethan looked out of the small window at the planet below. He had come here with nothing but hope and desperation. And now, against all odds, they had struck a blow against one of the galaxy's most powerful empires. The feeling of accomplishment was overwhelming, but there was still so much left to do. They had made Valera vulnerable, but would she respond? Would she realize that her empire was no longer untouchable? Ethan turned to Yarrick, who was seated at the front of the shuttle, overseeing their departure. "What now?" Yarrick looked back at him, a serious expression on his face. "Now we wait. We've shown Valera that she's not invincible. She'll come after us, of course. But this is the moment when she has to choose. Will she continue to ignore the galaxy's problems, or will she finally act? We'll know soon enough." Ethan nodded. He understood now. This wasn't just about Earth or Valera's empire. This was about forcing someone with so much power to finally see the truth. If Valera didn't step up, if she didn't help, the consequences would fall on her empire. She would be the one to blame. The shuttle flew through the stars, making its way toward the rendezvous point where they would meet up with the other rebels. The galaxy felt different now. The weight of their actions pressing down on Ethan, it wasn't just about saving his home anymore. It was about changing the future of the galaxy, about proving that no one, no matter how powerful, could remain indifferent when the stakes were this high. As they arrived at the rebel base, the sense of urgency hadn't diminished. The team quickly disembarked, and Ethan felt the familiar stirrings of tension in the pit of his stomach. The device had worked. The defense grid had been disabled. But would it be enough to make Valera see that she could no longer ignore the galaxy's problems? The rebels gathered in a large room, all eyes on Urek as he stepped to the front. "We've done it," he said, his voice firm, but there was no celebration. "Not yet. We've shown Valera that her empire is not invincible. Now, we wait. If she's truly as proud as we believe, she'll come after us. But we need to be ready for whatever comes next." Ethan took a seat among the others, his mind still spinning. They had accomplished the impossible, but the hardest part was still to come. Valera was not someone who would admit defeat easily. She was proud, arrogant, and used to being in control. Would she take the bait? Would she act in time to save her empire? Would she refuse to listen until it was too late? Hours passed as the rebels prepared for their next move. Some gathered supplies, while others worked on strengthening their defenses. Ethan stayed by Yarek's side, watching the screens as they tracked Valera's fleet. For a moment, everything felt strangely quiet. The calm before the storm. Then, just as they had expected, the message came through. It wasn't from Valera directly, but from one of her top commanders, a stern-faced alien who had been one of her most loyal followers. The message was brief, but it made Ethan's heart race. "Princess Valera demands your immediate surrender." The commander's voice crackled through the comms. "Her fleet is on its way to your location. Surrender now, and she will show mercy. Refuse, and she will annihilate you." Ethan's eyes met Yarek's. The moment they had been waiting for had arrived. Valera had made her move. "Send the response," Yarek said, his voice calm but filled with resolve. "Tell her we'll fight for the galaxy, and we'll never surrender." As the message was sent, Ethan felt the weight of the decision. There was no turning back now. They had forced Valera to confront the truth. Now they had to face the consequences. Of that truth, the battle was about to begin. And Ethan, along with the rebels, would stand against Valera's empire, not as a group of weaklings, but as warriors ready to defend their homes, their future, and the galaxy itself.